everybody. Welcome back to the Here's to You Creative Brief Podcast. We have an official name now. Like I said in the last episode, I've been bouncing around names. It was the Brief, then it was just Here's to You Podcast. I think I've settled on one, the Creative Brief. The Creative Brief Show by Here's to You. We'll workshop it. Not finalized, but I like the Creative Brief. I use a lot of creative briefs in my own work with Here's to You. And a creative brief maybe isn't as like universal as, you're not going to create a creative brief for yourself if you're just doodling, but it's a nice way to keep things organized. We might kind of formulate the agenda for the show around kind of what a creative brief entails. So you got your company background, your objective, and then you get the meat and the potatoes of the podcast. So the Creative Brief Podcast by Here's to You. We're going to stick with that. Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Hud Oberly, a.k.a. Hud Oberly Finn. Welcome to the beautiful... Dang it, I messed up. I'm keeping it in, though. I'm keeping it in. Welcome. My name is Hud Oberly. I'm your host, a.k.a. Hud Oberly Finn, coming to you live from the beautiful borough of Brooklyn, New York. Every Friday, I'm here with your favorite creative discussion and topics, and Here's to You insight. So what is Here's to You? What is Here's to You? It's a very abstract name because you wouldn't know exactly how kind of deep it gets if you just read someone's wearing a shirt that says Here's to You. But Here's to You is a creative lifestyle brand built for creatives of all skill levels to harness their creativity through branded events, content, and apparel, and maybe some other products in the future. So the podcast is obviously a work in progress, a WIP, as they say in the business. Today's podcast is going to be a little different. We're elevating every podcast. I already know the next podcast is going to be better because I'm going to add an additional segment that I'm not able to add this week. But if you're watching on YouTube, you'll be able to see the upgrades from the previous episode that went live last week. There's going to be some upgrades in this one. So if you're watching on YouTube, hi YouTube, I see you. I don't know if that was weird or not. Subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, LinkedIn. I'm really loving LinkedIn for Here's to You because it's the business professional profile or the platform. But I know there's a lot of business people on there that have creative hobbies, so I'm trying to tap into that. So I've been posting probably a couple times a week, maybe even up to 3 to 4 times a week on LinkedIn. So Here's to You, H2Y. You'll see it pop up, the H2Y logo. And Instagram is at Here's to You _H2Y. All other platforms are Here's to You H2Y. And you can shop all the apparel that's available right now at Here's to You H2Y.com. All my YouTube friends can see this, but I'm rocking the H2Y crew neck. There are only 4 mediums of this left. So if you wear a medium, if you know someone that wears a medium, let them know about this crew neck. I'm looking at myself in the mirror here. It's great. It's a little warmer. It's a little more insulated, but super soft on the inside. So like today's like 38 degrees in Brooklyn, and I wore this, and I just got like a jean jacket on. If I didn't have this, I'd probably go a little bulkier of a coat, and then but it's a nice layering piece. It's a nice layering piece. So subscribe to the fit checks, to the evolutions that we'll be having, the additional segments coming soon, and then the upgrades in this podcast. So check it out. Please subscribe. The subscribes are for, obviously I want people to see the show, but in the future, I'm going to be highlighting artists and doing some segments on different artists. So I want them to have as many eyes on them as possible. And I think that was it. But yeah, please subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. And we'll be seeing you here every Friday. So what is the objective of this podcast? And we're doing a lot of housekeeping here. I'm kind of resetting this podcast with the new name and some of the upgrades. But what I want you to walk away at the very least entertained. On this podcast, it's not very organized. There's some structure to it, but I'm essentially starting every sentence without knowing where it's going to end up. I may say something totally chaotic, but we don't know. It's I want you to be entertained when you leave the podcast, when you walk away, when you finish your morning walk, when you finish your morning coffee, when you finish your morning commute or your evening commute walk. Maybe not an evening coffee, but hey, I do that sometimes too. Got to get that. Got to get some stuff done around here. So yeah, and also I mean we're gonna have some here's to you updates. So you're gonna walk away update on here's to you, the behind the scenes, behind the curtain look of operating a business, especially in New York and Brooklyn, and especially being an indigenous entrepreneur, indigenous small business owner. There's gonna be aspects of that that I'll share, and that'll weave into some of my personal journey with taking on this venture of here's to you. So. Um, that's what you can expect to walk away with from this podcast every week. The Creative Brief Show by Here's to You. We're going to workshop that. So I meant to put this at the beginning of the week or beginning of the show last week, but the question of the week. I really want to hear the feedback, and I'm really trying to be intentional on what the questions are based on what's happening in the creative world. Would I just kind of get a spidey sense of where people are at, and that's not possible because I'm thinking about people that I know from all over the country, all over the world, but I want to hear your answers to these questions. So either comment on the YouTube video or on anytime I post about it on social media, all those LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, or no, not Twitter, not really focused on Twitter, but Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, TikTok, those four, and the YouTubes. Comment if you have a good answer or not even a good answer. It can be any answer for the question of the week. So, this week's question of the week that I want you to respond to in the comments is, what are your two favorite creative outlets, artistic crafts? Because then everyone, not anyone who has dabbled into creativity, whether it's just like a hobby or you've doodled around, everyone has kind of dabbled in more than just one creative craft. So whether that's drawing and painting, video editing and photography, sewing, it can be like beading and sewing. What are the two crafts or a combination of it? It doesn't have to be those exact combinations, but what are the two crafts that you enjoy the most? Because everyone's a multi hyphenate in the creative world. Everyone's dabbled, like I said. So let me know your answers to that question. The question of the week. That's also the question of the week that will go out in the brief newsletter. Got to think about got to streamline some of these names, but the email newsletter that I send out through Here's to You. You can sign up for that newsletter on the website, here's to you, h2y.com. Scroll to the bottom, you'll see the sign up for the emails. So that's the question of the week. What are your two favorite creative outlets? What are your two favorite crafts? The same question, but just worded differently. Okay, so if you like the housekeeping segment so far and the question of the week, please hit a follow and a subscribe. Also, quick note for the video watchers. Obviously, I'm holding the mic this week. With the mic on me, like clipped on me, it sounded I was either underwater or inside of your fridge. I didn't like the audio, so I'm holding it now. Like I said, we're gonna be evolving. We're gonna be evolving. With the audio, we'll make it maybe a little more tidy in the future, but right now this is the best option for the cleanest audio. So now the meat and the potatoes of the podcast and the show. I want to talk about perfectionism and how that relates to kind of my experience with the clothing brand, but obviously I hope you can take some nuggets along from the discussion to whatever craft it is that you do. So, I want to start with the meaning of Here's to You because it will tie into the opposite of perfectionism. Yeah, I'd say that. So Here's to You, and I may have mentioned this on a previous podcast from last year where I was really, it was a raw podcast, but Here's to You came about from a discussion with my grandmother, my Ika, as we say in Caddo, and I was thinking I wanted to get a name for this business, this adventure I wanted to go on with what eventually became Here's to You. But I was just hanging out with her one day in Oklahoma, and I was like, "What's a catchy name, catchy phrase that comes to mind?" And she thought about it, and she said, "Here's to looking at you." And she said it's from the movie Casablanca. It's from the movie Casablanca, which I haven't seen all the way through or much of. So I was like, "Do you mean Here's to You?" And she's like, "No, Here's to looking at you." But I wrote down Here's to You on my little notepad, and I played around with it, and I looked at it. I did the H2Y like acronym. I was like, "Ooh, I like that." Okay. And then I was like, okay, what does it mean? Because I always have to have a meeting. I have to always find a reasoning for things. It can be a real problem sometimes. I always have to know the reason why for things, but or at least come up with my own version of why. So I was like, what does here's to you mean? Is it, cheersing here's to you? As you can see on YouTube, I'm cheersing a glass of champagne. Or what does it mean? I thought about it and I was like, you know what? My life and where I've been living in Los Angeles, working for different companies, playing different roles, I've always kind of, I, I always kind of trusted my gut. And when I wanted to go after something, I went for it. And so what I thought about here's to you what it could be is a me to me statement for you to say to yourself when you're deciding between practicality and fulfillment. So it's like you looking at the mirror and you have a decision to make whether you want to go for this passion project, this passion path, or something practical, safe, structure, less risky. It's like, you know what? You look in the mirror yourself and you say, here's to you. And what does that mean? Maybe that means go to the safe route. I don't know. For me, that's never been the case, but um, I thought that's a good reminder for people, especially if you get to know the brand enough that you get to hear that story. Is that it's a me to me statement. It's not like an external. It's like a very internal. Focus on yourself, better yourself, make the decisions that make you the happiest. But also, when you're the happiest, you're able to provide for others or shine the light for other people to see. So that's what here's to you means. So how does that relate to perfectionism? Is that those leaps of faith, the taking action on saying here's to you in the mirror, that ain't gonna be perfect. That's not gonna be perfect. My example is this podcast. I started it. I looked and it's kind of hard to believe, but the first episode of this was in November of last year, and that was so raw and not great technically, like the the technology side. I thought I had this mic going, which I'm holding, but I didn't have it going. The audio was from the computer, sounded terrible. You could hear the heater. It was just not good. But as each episode has gone by, I've improved every little thing. On YouTube, you'll see this video is a little more crispier. It's a little more clear. I've always had the two cameras here. I'm looking at both now. Not like not like a chameleon, but like back and forth. I'm looking at both of them, but they're both in 4K this time, which, a lot of people, see 4K on their flat screen TVs now, but this podcast is now shot in 4K. There's a little more motion graphic to it this week. Next week, there's going to be an evolution. So when you take a leap of faith, there's always going to be a battle within yourself of perfectionism, but you just gotta take the leap. And I have friends that I know, and they like talk about things they want to do, and they haven't done them yet. And sometimes the responses are like, "Well, I'm not to this point yet. I don't have this yet. I don't have the environment isn't right." And maybe that's valid, and I can't tell people what they should do, but sometimes you just got to like take a leap of faith when it's not perfect. So that's my that's my story on perfectionism. In clothing, it's so you're never gonna be perfect in the clothing business. I feel like even you hear about brands that grow exponentially really fast. There's always gonna be things behind the scenes that have happened where like maybe there's a garment detail that's not exactly how that was supposed to turn out. And you can go through as much sampling as you want to, which we talked about last week with the design debacle, which I'll get an update on that later, but I'll give an update on that later. But nothing is going to be perfect in the clothing business. Your vision is never really going to be met, is what I've learned. Maybe once I get to a certain point, it will be, but there's always going to be adjustments, and you got to be flexible and adaptable. So whatever perfect was at the beginning of the process, it's going to change, and hopefully you strive to get to that quote unquote perfect. But I think the most important thing in a lot of what relates to the creative world is you just gotta get reps in, get work out there, get some finished pieces out there. So perfectionism, I strive for it, I believe in it, but Can't let it hold you back. So, quick update on the design debacle from last week. If you like what you're listening to, please subscribe on YouTube. Please follow on Instagram. Here's to you underscore H2Y. All other platforms. Here's to you H2Y. All spelled out. There's no numbers in there. Don't even try. So the design debacle. So I got the sample back. Didn't love it. I'm actually gonna just scratch the whole design. I'm gonna create a new one. Try to get a new sample made by early next week. Have that sample back, and hopefully get these snazzy sweaters out to you. So that's the update on that. And I had some good responses to the question of the week from last week of where people are from and kind of sharing about their creative community. A little less, little fewer responses. There were fewer responses to that question than the creative goals one, but I heard some good responses from people in Detroit, which Detroit is kind of an underrated, I feel like, artistic city if you aren't really in the field. There's a lot of great art there. I even did some art programming there when I worked for the Sundance Film Institute. We did some stuff there. So, very great creative community there. Also heard from Costa Rica. We're international, baby. Here's to you, worldwide. Wide. We're in Costa Rica. Here's to you. People know about Here's to You in Costa Rica, which is pretty cool. So they said they have a lot of art markets out there and a lot of workshops. I asked a follow-up question of what the craft of the workshops usually is. Didn't get a response, but we're growing our community all over the world. So I appreciate you watching and listening. Here's to you for the creative in you. That's the Creative Brief Podcast show. Bye. Here's to you. See you next week. Peace.